The K'Ril Nexus had been planning this moment for centuries. A coalition of powerful alien races, each with its own advanced technologies and devastating weaponry, they had long scoured the galaxy for planets that could be conquered and exploited. Their conquest had been methodical, driven by cold logic and a hunger for resources, and Earth, an insignificant blue and green orb in a far-flung corner of the galaxy, seemed like the perfect prize. The K'Ril flagship, the Valkanor, was a towering warship capable of reducing entire cities to rubble with a flick of its energy cannons. Commander Vorak stood at the helm, his reptilian eyes scanning the galactic map displayed before him. He was calculating, efficient, and utterly unconcerned by the planet's lack of defensive capabilities. His orders were simple: land, subdue the inhabitants, strip the resources, and move on. Beside him, his strategic advisor, a member of the Auralis species named Zathel, watched in silence. The Auralis, known for their vast intellect and a gift for foresight, had always been an enigma to the other species in the Nexus. Zathel had a peculiar air about him, an unsettling calmness that made others wary. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were often the ones that changed the course of history. Zathel leaned closer to Vorak, his mind focused on a troubling pattern he had been tracking across their long-range probes. "Commander," Zathel said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of caution, "I advise caution with this one. Earth is unlike any planet we have encountered. There is something off about it." Vorak turned, narrowing his eyes. "What do you mean, off?" "It's primitive. The humans have no spacefaring capabilities, no advanced weaponry. They're perfect for the taking." Zathel hesitated, his mind racing as he replayed the data. "It is not their technology, Vorak. It is something else. Their planet, its energy fields are unique. There are disturbances, anomalies in their biosphere that do not align with our understanding of planetary dynamics. I've been monitoring their communications, and there's a pattern to their history of survival. They have weathered catastrophes beyond any reasonable measure. I believe they might be resistant to invasion in ways we don't fully comprehend." Vorak snorted dismissively. "Do you doubt our superiority, Zathel? Our fleet outmatches theirs in every way. This planet will fall." Zathel remained silent for a moment, studying Vorak's sharp features. "I do not doubt your strength, Commander, but I suggest you consider the possibility that Earth may hold an advantage that we do not fully understand. We may not be prepared for what we find there." Vorak dismissed the warning with a wave of his hand. "Prepare the fleet. We move on Earth tomorrow. Their so-called defenselessness will be their undoing." As the meeting adjourned, Zathel lingered, still troubled by the strange energy readings emanating from Earth. He wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he felt a gnawing sense of unease that he couldn't shake. Something about Earth's history, its remarkable ability to endure, seemed to hint at a far deeper mystery. A mystery that could spell the end of the K'Ril. And yet, Zathel was powerless to warn the others. The invasion was already in motion. The K'Ril fleet broke through Earth's atmosphere like a storm of steel and fire, their ships slicing through the sky with a precision that left no room for error. Commander Vorak stood on the bridge of the Valkanor, his reptilian gaze fixed on the blue and green orb below. His anticipation was palpable. This was to be a swift and unchallenged conquest. Earth's primitive inhabitants would be no match for their might. The flagship hovered ominously above the eastern United States, casting a shadow over the sprawling cities. The K'Ril had chosen this position for maximum psychological impact. They wanted to send a message to break Earth's spirit before they even made landfall. Vorak activated the communication array, a booming voice echoing from the Valkanor's speakers as it transmitted a message to Earth's governments. People of Earth, this is Commander Vorak of the K-Ril Nexus. Your planet is now under the authority of the Nexus. Surrender immediately and prepare for assimilation. If you resist, we will annihilate your cities, one by one, until nothing remains. The transmission crackled across every communication network on Earth, reaching every corner of the world. Governments scrambled to respond, unable to comprehend the scale of the threat they faced. The world was united in panic, each nation desperately attempting to decipher the nature of the invaders. Most believed it to be a hoax or some elaborate alien prank. But General James Harlow of the United States military wasn't fooled. Harlow, a seasoned veteran with a reputation for clear thinking in the face of impossible odds, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. He had been briefed on the possibility of extraterrestrial encounters in his classified military training, but nothing had prepared him for this. The sheer scale of the alien presence was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. He wasted no time in assembling a war council with the President and the leaders of other key world powers. "Mr. President, we're facing an existential threat," General Harlow said, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't some diplomatic negotiation. These aliens are here for one thing: control. We need to prepare for combat, and fast." The President nodded, his face pale. "How do we fight something like this? They're more advanced than us." "We fight with what we have," Harlow replied, his eyes narrowing. "We may not have the tech, but we have something they don't: unity, resourcefulness, and the will to survive." While the military began preparing for what was to come, a quiet figure in a lab in California was busy working on a different kind of plan. Michael Nash, an aerospace engineer working for a private defense contractor, had been following the news about the alien invasion. The transmission had piqued his curiosity, but it wasn't until he analyzed the pattern of the K-Ril's communication and technology that he noticed something strange. The aliens' communication, while advanced, had an oddly cautious tone. Nash began to suspect that the K-Ril might not be as confident in their victory as they appeared. There was something more to this situation, something that even the aliens hadn't accounted for. His fingers flew across his keyboard, sending encrypted messages to military contacts. Nash had a hunch. Earth wasn't as defenseless as the K-Ril believed. It was time to prove it. The K-Ril fleet remained poised in Earth's orbit, their ships orbiting like vultures waiting to strike. But things were not going according to plan. Commander Vorak had anticipated a swift victory, but something was terribly wrong. The first hint came just hours after the initial transmission. As the K-Ril flagship Valkanor prepared to deploy its ground forces, the ship's cloaking systems began to glitch. At first, it was a minor inconvenience, some slight interference in the ship's invisibility technology. But then, the disruptions grew worse. The Valkanor flickered in and out of sight, as if the planet itself was resisting the ship's presence. "Commander," Zaffel's voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable edge of concern. "There's something interfering with our systems. I've analyzed the anomaly. It's not a random fluke. There is a field surrounding this planet that is unlike anything we've encountered." Vorak's eyes narrowed. "I don't have time for excuses, Zathel. We have a planet to conquer." "But it's not just our cloaking systems," Zathel pressed, his fingers flying across the data streams on his console. "Our navigation systems are malfunctioning as well. The gravitational field, it's unstable. There's something pulling at us from the planet's surface. It's as if Earth's atmosphere is alive." Vorak growled, irritated. "Explain." Zathel hesitated, then spoke slowly. I believe Earth's biosphere is producing this effect. It seems to be manipulating our ship's systems. It's not just an environment. It's like the planet itself is resisting us. Vorak slammed his fist onto the console, growling in frustration. Impossible. A planet cannot resist us. We are K'ril. Despite his outward confidence, Vorak couldn't shake the unsettling feeling creeping up his spine. Something was wrong, and no amount of K'ril technology seemed to be able to compensate for it. Meanwhile, on the surface of Earth, the situation was escalating rapidly. General Harlow and his team had initiated a global defense plan. After the initial shock of the aliens' arrival, world leaders had put aside differences to form a united front against the invaders. Military units from every country began gathering, preparing for what they believed would be the fight of humanity's existence. But the true surprise was the humans' ability to adapt. Using the technology left behind by the K'ril's downed scout ship, a ship that had crash-landed in the American Midwest. Scientists like Michael Nash and a small group of engineers began reverse engineering the alien technology. What they discovered was remarkable. The K'ril's advanced weaponry was more complex than anything humanity had ever seen, but it wasn't invulnerable. They could manipulate it, if only they had time. As Nash pored over alien schematics, a revelation struck him. The K'ril were out of their element. They weren't just invading a planet. They were disrupting an ecosystem far more resilient than they had ever encountered. Earth's environment was fighting back. It wasn't just humanity that had a chance. Earth itself might be the greatest weapon of all. The moment that realization hit, Nash sent an encrypted message to General Harlow. "The planet is alive, General, and I think it's preparing to fight." As the K'ril fleet hovered above Earth, ready to initiate their ground assault, something unexpected happened. A sudden surge of electromagnetic energy rippled across the planet's surface, sending shockwaves through the K'ril ship's systems. For a moment, the entire fleet seemed to pause in midair, their sophisticated navigation and communication systems briefly destabilizing. A disorienting hum filled the command rooms of every K'ril vessel, and the Valkanor was no exception. Commander Vorak gripped the console as his ship rocked under the interference. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp with anger. "Energy field interference," Zathel replied, his eyes glued to his console. "It's coming from the planet's surface. It's like a defense mechanism has been triggered." His voice was tinged with disbelief. "The electromagnetic field around Earth is highly concentrated, and it's growing stronger. It's as if the planet itself is retaliating." Vorak's frustration turned to caution. The K'ril were used to overwhelming forces, to planets that were little more than helpless prey. But this planet, Earth, was behaving like a wounded animal, wild, unpredictable, and with an unsettling ferocity. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, General Harlow's forces were taking advantage of the momentary chaos. The world's military had quickly begun to adapt to the alien threat, albeit with limited resources. The initial wave of K'ril invaders had been unexpected, but humanity was learning fast. Under Harlow's leadership, small but highly effective resistance groups had formed, combining local militias and elite military units to fight back against the alien forces. "We need to get them hard and fast," Harlow said as he watched the latest satellite feed showing a K'ril troopship descending over the Pacific Northwest. "Let's make sure they know they're not dealing with a helpless world." Harlow had already begun coordinating guerrilla tactics, using the K'ril's technology against them. The data Nash had sent on their downed scout ship had been invaluable. With it, they had quickly reverse-engineered the K'ril's energy weaponry, fashioning makeshift EMP devices and disrupting the Kirill's landing craft long enough to delay their arrival on the ground. Human ingenuity, while still raw and unrefined, was starting to make a dent in the invaders' plans. In the heart of California, Michael Nash continued his analysis, his mind working overtime. As he pored over the alien schematics, he began to see something even more troubling. The Kirill weren't just technologically superior, they were built for conquest. Their species thrived on war, had evolved to spread their dominion across the stars. The more Nash learned about them, the more he understood just how much Earth's environment was fighting back, how alive the planet seemed to be in its resistance. He reached out to Harlow with another urgent message. The planet is more than just a defensive mechanism. It's evolving. Something's happening here. Earth is adapting faster than we can comprehend. Back on the battlefield, the Kirill were beginning to feel the pressure. They had expected Earth's defense to be feeble, but with every passing hour, the invaders were learning a harsh lesson. Earth wasn't going down without a fight. The Kirill's ships were experiencing continued disruptions, and their carefully laid plans were slowly crumbling under the weight of an unexpected adversary, one that wasn't just human, but the planet itself. Commander Vorak's pride was beginning to crack. He couldn't afford to admit it, but the truth was becoming undeniable. Earth wasn't as helpless as they had believed. And the longer they stayed, the more they risked provoking something they didn't understand. They had underestimated Earth's will to survive, and now, it seemed, Earth was showing them just how wrong they were. The situation on Earth was rapidly escalating into something neither side had expected. The Kirill, still reeling from the growing disturbances in their technology, had begun their bombardment, targeting major cities and military strongholds across the globe. From their orbiting fleet, Vorak issued the orders to fire, intending to break the spirit of Earth's defenders once and for all. But when the Kirill unleashed their full arsenal, something extraordinary occurred. As their energy beams struck the surface of Earth, massive waves of destructive force rippled outward, but the planet itself seemed to push back. It wasn't just a passive resistance anymore. Earth's weather patterns, seemingly out of nowhere, began to shift violently. Cyclones erupted over the ocean with unprecedented speed, and lightning storms flared up, blocking the path of Kirill projectiles. "Commander, the bombardment isn't working," one of Vorak's lieutenants exclaimed. "Our weapons are being diverted by atmospheric currents. The energy is being absorbed and rerouted." Vorak's cold gaze flicked over to Zathel, who was studying the data intently. "What do you mean rerouted?" Zathel took a deep breath. "This isn't natural. I believe the planet is channeling energy through its ecosystems, its weather, its oceans. It's forming an unseen barrier that our weapons cannot penetrate. The planet's energy systems are responding as if they've recognized the threat." Vorak's sharp features tightened into a grimace. Impossible. A planet cannot actively resist like this. It's preposterous. But Zathel's data was irrefutable. The planet's electromagnetic pulse had grown in strength, and the disturbances were more organized now, more focused. It was no longer random. Earth was actively defending itself. Even the Kirill's finest weaponry, charged plasma cannons, antimatter bombs, seemed less effective as Earth's atmosphere absorbed and deflected them. Down below, General Harlow and his forces were beginning to realize the true extent of what was happening. After the initial chaos of the alien assault, the military had managed to regroup and form a global defense network. With Nash's help, they had begun to weaponize the Kirill's own technology, turning their energy weapons and cloaking devices against them. But even with this advantage, Harlow knew that they couldn't rely solely on human ingenuity to win this fight. The real power, it seemed, lay in the Earth itself. "We're not just defending this planet, General," one of Harlow's officers said, his voice tense as he monitored the incoming reports. "We're part of something bigger. This planet is fighting for us." Harlow nodded grimly, understanding the gravity of the situation. That's right. Earth has been underestimating itself for millennia. It's been waiting for something or someone to awaken it. Back in the command center, Michael Nash was feverishly working with scientists to decode the true nature of Earth's defenses. The more they analyzed, the more they realized that Earth's planetary network wasn't just reacting to the Kirill invasion, it was evolving. Whatever force had been dormant in the biosphere was now waking up, adapting to the threat in real time. It was as though Earth's entire ecosystem was working as a unified organism, with every storm, every seismic shift, every forest fire, and every wave acting as part of a coordinated defense. "We're not fighting alone," Nash whispered to himself, realizing the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. Earth wasn't just a passive planet, it was a weapon, one that had been built over eons to protect itself for exactly this kind of invasion. And now, the Kirill would feel the full force of that weapon. As the Kirill fleet faltered, their massive warships rattled by the unpredictable forces of Earth's environment, Commander Vorak called an emergency council. His impatience had turned to unease, and his pride was being slowly eroded by the planet's incredible resilience. On the bridge of the Valkanor, the atmosphere was tense, thick with the growing realization that Earth was not just a planet to conquer. It was a force to be reckoned with. "Prepare for another assault," Vorak ordered, but his voice lacked the conviction it once had. The smooth confidence of the Kirill commanders, bred from countless victories, had begun to crack under the pressure. Zathel, his advisor, stood at the edge of the command deck, his posture stiff with anxiety. The Orcs were the Nexus' most trusted allies, but their caution regarding Earth had proven accurate. Zathel could not shake the sense of foreboding that had plagued him since their arrival. His thoughts were interrupted when the Orcs made their presence known. Through a shimmering portal, an emissary of the Orcs species, a being known as Tyrath, materialized on the bridge. Tyrath's form was translucent, a being of pure thought and energy, radiating an unsettling calm. His golden eyes surveyed the room, lingering on Vorak with an almost unreadable expression. "Commander Vorak," Tyrath said, his voice a harmonic blend of multiple frequencies that seemed to vibrate in the air, "we must reconsider our approach." Vorak's irritation flared. "Reconsider. We have already made our decision. Earth is a weak planet, and we will break them." Tyrath's gaze did not waver. "You misunderstand, Vorak. Earth is not weak. It is different. You are facing something far more powerful than your technology can comprehend." Vorak scoffed. "A planet cannot be powerful. It is an object, a resource. It has no will." "Your arrogance blinds you," Tyrath replied, his voice like a distant echo. "Earth is not simply an object. It is a living entity, a guardian species that has long been ignored by galactic civilization. The biosphere you face is not just reacting to your invasion, it is active. The energy fields surrounding Earth are ancient, older than your civilization. And it is not only the planet that defends itself, but its inhabitants, humanity. They are not as defenseless as you believe. They have always been stronger than you think." Zathel stepped forward, his brow furrowing. "The humans, they have always survived against impossible odds. Their history is one of constant struggle against nature, against each other. But this time, the struggle is different. Earth itself has awakened. Your attempt to conquer this planet risks much more than you realize." Vorak sneered. "Enough with your riddles, Tyrath. We will crush them." But Tyrath's eyes locked with his, and for the first time Vorak felt a cold chill. "If you do not heed my warning, Vorak, the consequences will be catastrophic, not just for you, but for the entire Nexus. Earth is not a prize to be claimed. It is a force that cannot be controlled." With that, the auraless emissary disappeared, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Vorak stood still, the weight of Tyrath's words sinking in. Zathel, too, remained quiet, his mind racing. He had seen it before, when one overestimated their power, when they failed to understand their opponent. The result was often destruction. As Vorak stared out into the vast expanse of space, the reality of the warning loomed large. Had they miscalculated? Below them, on Earth's surface, humanity continued to fight back. And this time, it wasn't just the humans who were standing firm. It was the planet itself, alive and awakening to defend what had always been its most valuable asset, its people. The Valkanor shuddered violently as another blast of electromagnetic energy surged from Earth's surface. This time, it wasn't just a disturbance in the atmosphere. It was a focused attack. The Kirill flagship had been hit by a direct pulse from the planet's biosphere, and the shockwave rippled through its hull. Lights flickered, systems faltered, and a shrill alarm blared across the bridge. "Commander, the main reactor is destabilizing." One of Vorak's officers shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Vorak gritted his teeth, his clawed hands gripping the console. "This is impossible," he muttered. "The planet's energy fields should be nothing more than a nuisance, not an offensive weapon." Zathel, his mind already racing with possibilities, analyzed the data rapidly. It is not just the planet's biosphere at work. Earth has a global network of tectonic activity, ocean currents, atmospheric patterns. All of it is synchronized. It's like an immune response. It knows we're here. Vorak turned sharply, fury and frustration flashing in his eyes. "Explain, Zathel, now." Zathel paused before answering, his voice steady but grave. "The human species has long lived in a delicate balance with their environment, adapting to its fluctuations, surviving natural disasters, and evolving in response to the forces of nature. But this is different. Earth's ecosystems are actively coordinating, its weather systems, its magnetic fields, even its volcanic activity, are all part of a living organism that is now targeting our fleet. And humanity, they've awakened to it." Vorak's mind raced as he processed the implications. It was clear now that Earth's ecosystem wasn't just reacting to their invasion. It was actively fighting back, using its natural processes to repel the invaders. The humans had not only survived their history of disasters and wars, but they had evolved in ways that made them resilient. And now that resilience had reached its apex. Below, the human resistance forces were seeing the fruits of their own efforts. General Harlow, overseeing operations from a military command center in the Rockies, had noticed an eerie calm as his communications team intercepted strange new signals coming from the planet's core. As Nash's team decoded more of the alien technology, they realized that Earth was emitting a kind of harmonic frequency, a signal that reverberated through every ecosystem, every biome, as if it were calling the entire planet to arms. "It's not just the military," Harlow said, staring at the data. "We've been fighting in isolation, but Earth is the weapon, and it's uniting everything." In a matter of hours, Earth's defenses escalated to an unprecedented level. Tornadoes, hurricanes, and tsunamis began to form with uncanny precision, targeting Kirill ships in low orbit and forcing them into retreat. The atmosphere itself was a living battlefield as electrical storms coursed through the sky, creating electromagnetic pulses that disabled K'ril communications and weapons systems. Waves of seismic activity caused tremors that rattled the Invaders' landing platforms, and supervolcanoes, long dormant, showed signs of awakening. But the true shock came when the K'ril realized that Earth's defenses were not random. The planet was choosing its targets. The largest ships, the most heavily armed, were systematically disabled first. The smaller crafts, the ones still attempting to make landfall, found themselves caught in violent storms that tossed them like toys, their trajectory thrown off by an intelligence they could not comprehend. Vorak stood before the command deck of the Valkanar, his chest tight with fear. We need to pull back. Now. We have underestimated them. But as the fleet retreated into the outer reaches of space, Zathel, standing silently behind Vorak, couldn't help but feel a gnawing dread. The planet had sent its warning, but this was only the beginning. Earth was alive, and it had just begun to fight. The K'ril fleet, once poised to obliterate Earth, now retreated. The Valkanar, the pride of the Nexus, limped away from the planet, its systems in disarray, its crew shaken. Commander Vorak stood at the helm, his claws digging into the command console, his eyes flickering with a mix of rage and disbelief. Zathel, ever the calm voice of reason, stood beside him, his thoughts clouded by the realization that the mission had failed, and in a way that neither of them could have anticipated. "We cannot fight this," Vorak muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The planet, it resisted us. Zathel's eyes narrowed as he scanned the ship's diagnostics. It's not just the planet. The humans, they've become part of the defense. They'd learned to synchronize with Earth's systems. Every storm, every earthquake, every shift in the atmosphere is now controlled in ways we can't even begin to understand. Vorak snarled. "We were supposed to be gods among the stars, Zathel. We were supposed to crush them, to conquer this world, and yet we're being driven back by a biosphere." He turned sharply. "What have we become?" Zathel didn't respond immediately. He had seen it. Earth was not just resisting the invasion. It was actively learning, evolving its strategies in real time. And what was even more unnerving was the realization that Earth was far from being the fragile, primitive world that K'ril had once believed it to be. In the span of a few weeks, the humans had awakened to their planet's power and had harnessed it in ways that were far more sophisticated than any of their invaders had realized. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Harlow had rallied humanity's last stand. The planet's ecosystems had thrown off the K'ril assault, but the war was far from over. Human forces had seized the opportunity to regroup, using the brief respite to fortify their positions and launch counterattacks on the K'ril's remaining landing zones. "We can't let them regroup," Harlow said to his team. "We push them back for good now. Earth's ecosystems won't hold forever, but we've got one shot at this. We have to strike while the K'ril are vulnerable." Harlow's forces launched coordinated strikes on K'ril positions across the globe, using guerrilla tactics, EMP pulses, and alien tech to disrupt the invaders' remaining infrastructure. The humans, no longer relying solely on their own military might, now fought with the full might of their planet behind them. But the turning point came not from a human weapon or strategy. It came from Earth's biosphere itself. Over the course of the conflict, the strange, harmonic frequencies that Nash had detected had grown stronger, resonating through the planet's core. Earth's magnetic field intensified, and the storms, earthquakes, and volcanic activity became more focused, almost intentional in their fury. The planet wasn't just resisting anymore. It was attacking. In space, the Kirill fleet was battered by wave after wave of electromagnetic pulses sent from the planet's surface. Their ships began to spiral out of control, their navigational systems crippled. As Earth's fury mounted, the fleet began to break apart, ships tumbling from orbit as gravity itself seemed to conspire against them. Commander Vorak watched helplessly as the remains of his fleet descended toward the planet, shattered by the wrath of a world he had underestimated. The once proud Kirill were now reduced to a scattered remnant, their conquests a distant memory. Zaphel turned to him, the weight of their defeat clear in his eyes. "It's over. Earth has won." Vorak's heart sank, a bitter realization settling in. Earth was not merely a defenseless planet. It was a force of nature, a living, breathing entity that had chosen to fight. And they had underestimated it at every turn. From the ruins of the Kirill fleet, a final message was sent to the Nexus, a message of failure. Earth had proven that no species, no empire, could simply impose their will on a planet that had the power to defend itself. Humanity, united with Earth's primal power, had shown the galaxy that some worlds were beyond conquest. Some worlds fought back, and some were too strong to ever fall.